let me say it was quite clear from what the justices said that they very much want to decide this case and get past the Anti-Injunction Act. They want to decide the merits of the case. Second, Justice Breyer made quite clear that when you look at the law, Congress did not use the word tax. They were looking at a penalty for not complying with the mandate. Still not a tax. And it said quite clearly that it should have not been in a manner similar to tax, but that it wasn't a tax. Similarly, Justice Ginsburg said,
my side in front of your side.
Hopefully my smile gets later.
Basically cut off the government, or not pay taxes, and basically cut off the government's ability to act, and that this penalty was not about revenue for the government, even though it will generate some revenue, that it was fundamentally about compliance with the law, and that therefore it was not a tax in the way that the Anti-Injunction Act meant it to be. Given that, it was quite clear to me that in the court, from both sides, the conservatives as well as the liberals, that they want to hear the substance. They did not view the anti-tax injunction as a barrier to hearing the case because we're not dealing with a tax or a tax for revenue. We're dealing with a penalty. Indeed, I believe it was Justice Scalia or Justice Breyer who corrected Solicitor General Morelli, who kept saying a tax. And he says, don't you mean penalty? The whole court erupted because it was quite clear that that's what he meant, and that's what was there. I think this day went by. We're going to proceed on the merits of the case. We're not going to have a situation where the Supreme Court is going to say we can't decide because there has not been someone harmed by this situation. I'd like now to turn it over to Ron Pollack from Families USA, who is also in the court. He happens to be a lawyer.
I'll just conclude my remarks by saying a penalty compromises freedom as much as a tax.
Preach it. We're going to take turns. We gave you guys rights. Now it's time here. Go ahead.
Whether we are talking about a penalty or whether we are talking about a tax, it has the same effect on the conscience, on the liberties, and on the freedom of Americans to make their own decision on their fundamental conscientious objection to being forced, compelled by the government to compromise their most dearly held principles. That, I think, every one of these people would agree with. You can poll them. Can the government compel you to compromise your most fundamental moral, ethical, and religious beliefs? I think there would be a unanimous no, it cannot do that today. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Ron Pollack with Families USA. I wasn't a... Yeah, go ahead, you can cheer. You can do better than that, too. So today, the court was really hearing what many call a jurisdictional issue. And by a jurisdictional issue, the question is, does the court actually have the ability to listen to this case? And the Anti-Injunction Act, in essence, says if the legislation at issue is a tax, then you can only challenge that once the tax liability is due. And the tax liability for somebody who doesn't comply with the individual responsibility provision would fall due in April of 2015. So the question before the court was, do we have to wait till April 2015, in essence, to hear the arguments about the constitutionality of the individual responsibility provision? And so there were really two issues that the court was trying to work through. One is this a tax? And of course, the enforcement of this is done through a tax that falls due in April. It is required under the Internal Revenue Code, and you pay it to the Internal Revenue Service. So on the face of it, it looks like a tax. The second question is, if it is a tax, is this jurisdictional, or are there any exceptions allowed? And I would say, just in terms of my own impressions from the court, is that while I think many of the justices believe that this is a tax, they do want to hear this argument. They will hear the argument. Tomorrow they will hear the argument about the constitutionality of the individual responsibility provision. And I think on both sides, both the government and those who are challenging the Affordable Care Act feel that this case should go forward. In any event, the argument will be held tomorrow about whether the individual responsibility provision is constitutional. And all of these issues will be decided in June. So.